The year was 2157, and humans were still new to the Galactic Confederation. Most alien species looked down on humans. They thought of them as weak, emotional, and not very smart. This attitude was a problem for the small human embassy on Zarvius Prime, the political center of the Confederation. Sam Jones sat at his desk in the human embassy, rubbing his tired eyes. As the lead diplomat for Earth, he had faced countless challenges trying to improve humanity's standing among the stars. The blue light from his computer screen reflected off his glasses as he read the latest message. His heart sank. "They want a human guest on Galactic Spotlight?" Sam asked out loud, though no one else was in the room. "That's a disaster waiting to happen." Everyone in the 17 star systems knew about Jack Miller and his famous talk show. Jack was a tall, six-armed Zarvian with purple skin and a razor-sharp tongue. His show thrived on making guests from lesser species look foolish. Humans had only been part of the Confederation for 8 years, and they were Jack's favorite target even without a human guest. Sam pressed a button on his desk. "Betty, could you come in here, please?" Betty Clark walked in a moment later. She was the embassy's media relations specialist, a job that had become increasingly difficult as humans tried to find their place in galactic society. "You're not going to like this," Sam said, turning his screen so Betty could see the message. Betty's face fell as she read. "Jack Miller wants a human on his show? That's like throwing meat to a hungry lion." "Exactly, but the Zarvian Cultural Ministry is pushing for this. They say refusing would be seen as an insult." Sam sighed. "We need someone who can handle Jack's attacks without causing a diplomatic incident." Betty thought for a moment. "What about Keith Rivers, the cultural ambassador? He's so quiet." "Exactly," Betty said with a small smile. "He's calm, thoughtful, and impossible to provoke. Plus, the aliens find him strangely fascinating. Something about his face reminds them of old Earth entertainment they've watched." Sam considered this. Keith Rivers had joined the embassy staff 6 months ago. He had an unusual background: former military, then a meditation instructor, then diplomat. He was remarkably calm in all situations and had a strange ability to make people trust him. Many humans, and even some aliens, said he looked like a famous actor from old Earth, though Sam couldn't remember which one. "Okay," Sam decided. "Let's ask Keith, but I want to be clear about the risks." 2 hours later, Keith Rivers sat across from Sam and Betty in the embassy's small conference room. Keith wore a simple black suit that made his lean frame look even taller. His dark hair was medium length and slightly wavy. His eyes seemed kind but also somehow ancient, as if they had seen much more than his apparent age of 45 years would suggest. "So," Keith said in his gentle voice after they explained the situation, "Jack Miller wants to humiliate a human on his show, and you'd like me to be that human." "We'd understand completely if you refuse," Sam said quickly. "Miller is ruthless. He's made ambassadors from advanced civilizations break down in tears." Keith smiled. "I've dealt with worse than a rude talk show host." "This isn't just any talk show host," Betty warned. "He's watched by billions across the Confederation. Whatever happens will shape how aliens view humans for years." Keith nodded, his face serious. "I understand the stakes." He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "When would this happen?" "Next week," Sam said. "They're offering us the prime slot on Zarvian Unity Day. The audience will be huge." "I'll do it," Keith said simply. Sam and Betty exchanged surprised looks. They had expected to need to convince him. "Are you sure?" Sam asked. "You don't want time to think about it?" "I'm sure," Keith replied. "Sometimes the best way to change minds is to let others underestimate you." Across the city in a gleaming tower that pierced the pink Zarvian sky, Jack Miller sat with his producer, a greedy Floxian named Greel. Floxians were short, round aliens with green skin and 4 eyes that blinked in sequence rather than together. "A human has agreed to come on the show," Greel said, his wide mouth spreading into what passed for a smile among his kind. "The embassy is sending their cultural ambassador." Jack's purple face lit up with delight. He rubbed 2 of his 6 hands together, Excellent. Humans are so easy to rattle. Their faces change color when they're emotional. Did you know that? They call it blushing or going pale. It's pathetic. This one is named Keith Rivers, Greel continued, checking his notes. He's quite popular with some of the younger Confederation species. They say he has a calming presence. Jack laughed, a harsh sound like metal scraping. We'll see how calm he is when I'm done with him. Has the research team found good material? Greel nodded, all four of his eyes blinking in sequence. We have footage of humans showing fear, humans making diplomatic mistakes, and even some humans retreating in that border skirmish with the Taurians. Perfect, Jack said. This will be the most watched episode in years. Everyone loves seeing humans put in their place. Back at the embassy, Keith Rivers sat alone in his small apartment. The room was simple, with few personal items. A small plant sat on the windowsill and a single photograph stood on his bedside table, Keith with an older woman who shared his eyes. Keith touched a hidden panel on his wrist, and a holographic display appeared above his arm. He spoke quietly. Secure connection to Earth Defense Command. Authorization Rivers 7 Delta 9. After a moment, the hologram changed to show an older woman in a military uniform. She had short gray hair and a stern face that softened slightly when she saw Keith. Commander Wright, Keith greeted her. Rivers, she replied with a nod. Report. I've been invited to appear on Galactic Spotlight, Jack Miller's show. Commander Diane Wright's eyebrows rose slightly. The one who mocks humans for entertainment? The same, Keith confirmed. This could be the opportunity we've been waiting for. Wright's expression turned thoughtful. It's risky. If you fail, it could set back human relations considerably. And if I succeed, it could change everything, Keith pointed out. We can't keep hiding what we can do forever. The Confederation needs to know they can count on us, especially with the Taurian threat growing. Wright was quiet for a long moment. Use your judgment, Rivers. Show them enough to change their minds, but not enough to cause fear. Humans walking the line between impressive and terrifying has worked well for us so far. Understood, Keith said. I won't let Earth down. After ending the call, Keith walked to his window and looked out at the alien city. Pink clouds drifted between tall buildings that seemed to defy gravity. Ships of various sizes moved through designated air lanes. Below, aliens of many species walked the streets, but humans were rare. Keith remembered his training, the years of physical and mental enhancement, the painful procedures that had given him abilities no ordinary human possessed. He and others, like him, were Earth's secret weapons, diplomats on the surface, but something much more underneath. In 1 week, he would sit across from Jack Miller and change the course of human history in the stars. Either humans would continue to be seen as weak newcomers, or they would begin to be recognized as valuable allies. Keith smiled to himself. Jack Miller had no idea what was coming. The talk show host thought he was getting an easy target. Instead, he was about to face the best humanity had to offer. The week passed quickly. Soon it was the day of Keith's appearance on Galactic Spotlight. The show was filmed in a huge building in the entertainment district of Zarvius Prime. The structure looked like a giant crystal that caught and reflected the pink light of the Zarvian sun. Keith arrived 3 hours early as requested. A small nervous alien with blue skin and large eyes met him at the staff entrance. Mr. Rivers? I'm Lila, a production assistant for the show, she said in careful English. Lila was an Andarian, a species known for their empathy and kindness. Many Andarians worked in entertainment because they were good at understanding what audiences wanted. Nice to meet you, Lila, Keith said with a gentle smile. Lila led Keith through a maze of hallways. The green room is where guests wait before going on stage, she explained. You'll be called about 20 minutes before your segment. The green room wasn't actually green. It was a comfortable space with soft purple chairs and a table with refreshments. Through a large window, Keith could see the studio where the show would be filmed. Workers were busy adjusting lights and moving furniture. Can I get you anything? Lila asked. Water? A snack? We have some human foods. Water would be nice, thank you, Keith replied. After Lila left, Keith took out a small device that looked like a normal tablet. He pressed his thumb against it, and it scanned his fingerprint. The screen changed to show a secure connection to Earth Defense Command. Keith quickly reviewed his mission parameters and the latest intelligence on Jack Miller. The door opened, and Lila returned with a glass of water. She seemed surprised to find Keith so calm. Most guests were nervous wrecks. By this point, "You're very relaxed," she observed, placing the water on a small table. "Most guests can't sit still when they know they're going to face Jack." Keith smiled. "I've faced worse than tough questions." Lila looked around nervously, then lowered her voice. "Mr. Rivers, I should warn you. Jack has been preparing all week. For your interview. He has—" She hesitated. "He has some very unkind things planned." "Thank you for the warning," Keith said. "But I'll be fine. It's just that Jack doesn't just want to entertain with his human segment, he wants to humiliate. I've overheard the producers talking. They want this to be the definitive proof that humans don't belong in the Confederation." Keith took a sip of water. "And what do you think, Lila? Do humans belong in the Confederation?" The Andarian's large eyes blinked rapidly. "I think the Confederation should be for everyone who wants peace and cooperation. But I'm just a production assistant. No one cares what I think." "I care," Keith said. "And I agree with you. That's why I'm here." Lila nodded, still looking worried. "The show starts in an hour. I'll come get you when it's time." After she left, Keith stood and walked to the window. He could now see the audience filing into their seats. There were beings of all shapes and sizes, tall, skinny aliens with 4 arms, short, round creatures that moved by rolling, even some that floated above their seats like balloons. But there were no humans. The show's producers had made sure of that. On the other side of the studio, Jack Miller was in his dressing room. 3 assistants worked on his appearance, polishing his purple skin until it gleamed under the lights. "Is the human here?" Jack asked Greel, his producer. "Yes, arrived early. Very calm, according to Lila," Greel replied. Jack smiled, showing his pointed teeth. "They always start calm. Then they get angry, then embarrassed, then they practically run off the stage. It's the same pattern every time." "The audience is nearly full," Greel said. "Biggest crowd of the season. Everyone wants to see the human." "Squirm. Let's not disappoint them," Jack replied, examining his reflection in the mirror. "Is the special footage ready for the end of the segment?" Greel nodded, all 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "Ready to go, it's perfect. Shows the humans retreating during the Taurian border incident. Clear evidence of cowardice." "Excellent. This will be my finest work. After tonight, humans will be a laughingstock across the Confederation." Back in the green room, Keith had put away his secure tablet and was now sitting quietly with his eyes closed. He appeared to be meditating. In reality, he was activating certain enhanced abilities that would help him during the show. His heart rate slowed, his brain activity shifted. His body temperature regulated perfectly despite the studio being slightly warmer than humans typically preferred. Lila returned, looking even more nervous than before. "Mr. Rivers? They're ready for you." Keith opened his eyes and stood smoothly. "Thank you, Lila." "I just heard Jack's opening monologue," she whispered, as they walked toward the stage. "It's worse than I thought. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" "More sure than ever," Keith replied. His calm confidence surprised the young Andarian. They stopped at the edge of the stage, just out of sight of the audience. From here, Keith could hear Jack Miller's voice booming through the studio. "And now the moment you've all been waiting for," Jack was saying. "Our special guest today comes from a species so primitive they only discovered faster-than-light travel a century ago. They still fight among themselves over pieces of land on their home planet. They require oxygen to breathe. Can you imagine anything more inefficient? Please welcome, or don't, it doesn't matter to me, Earth's cultural ambassador, Keith Rivers." The audience laughed at Jack's introduction. Some made hissing noises, which were the Zarvian equivalent of booing. "Good luck," Lila whispered as Keith stepped onto the stage. The bright lights were designed to disorient guests, but Keith's enhanced vision adjusted instantly. He walked calmly to the guest chair across from Jack Miller. The Zarvian host was larger in person than he appeared on broadcasts. His 6 arms were positioned to make him seem even bigger, a psychological tactic Keith recognized immediately. "Welcome. Human," Jack said, not bothering to use Keith's name. "Are you comfortable? We tried to make sure the chair would support your weak spine. I understand humans can't even survive a simple fall without breaking their fragile bones." The audience laughed on cue. Keith simply smiled and settled into his seat. "I'm quite comfortable, thank you," he replied. "It's a pleasure to be here, Jack." Jack seemed slightly thrown off by Keith's calm demeanor but recovered quickly. "Let's start with the basics for our audience. Humans need to breathe oxygen constantly, right? What happens if you don't get enough? Your brain starts to die. Within minutes?" "That's correct," Keith said. "Different species evolve different survival mechanisms. Ours requires oxygen." "How terribly inconvenient," Jack said with mock sympathy. "And you can only survive in a very narrow temperature range too. Isn't that right? Too hot or too cold and you simply die?" "We adapt," Keith said simply. "That's our specialty." Jack pulled up an image on the large screen behind them. It showed Earth with its blue oceans and white clouds. "Your home planet. Still recovering from ecological damage your own species caused? Quite ironic that you want to join a confederation dedicated to preservation of life when you nearly destroyed your own world." Instead of becoming defensive, Keith nodded. "We made mistakes. We learned from them. The Earth now is healthier than it's been in 300 years. For the next 20 minutes, Jack continued his attacks, growing increasingly frustrated by Keith's calm responses. The audience, which had been laughing and jeering at first, grew quieter. Some were beginning to listen to Keith's answers with interest rather than mockery. Jack noticed the shift in the room's energy and decided it was time for his final attack. He signaled to Greel, who was standing off stage. "Let's talk about courage," Jack said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "Something humans claim to value. I have some interesting footage I'd like to share with our audience." The large screen behind them flickered to life, showing a recording of a space battle. Human ships were visible, clearly pulling away from a larger force of aggressive-looking vessels. "This is from the Taurian border incident 3 months ago," Jack explained to the audience. "Watch as the brave humans retreat, leaving their allies exposed. Is this the kind of species you want protecting Confederation borders?" The audience murmured. Jack turned to Keith, all 6 arms spread wide in a gesture of challenge. "Care to explain this display of human courage?" he asked with a sneer. Keith looked at the footage for a long moment. Then he turned back to Jack, his expression unchanged, but something new in his eyes, a hint of steel beneath the calm. "That footage," Keith said quietly, "is incomplete." Jack's confidence wavered slightly at Keith's tone. Something was changing in the studio's atmosphere. For the first time, Jack felt a flicker of uncertainty about how this interview would end. A strange silence fell over the studio. The audience, which had been laughing at Jack's jokes all night, now watched with interest as Keith Rivers stared at the footage of human ships retreating from battle. "Incomplete?" Jack Miller repeated, his voice mocking. "I understand denial is a common human response to shame, but the recording speaks for itself." Keith remained calm. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the control panel on Jack's desk that operated the large screen. Jack hesitated, then waved one of his 6 arms in permission. "By all means. I'm curious to see how you'll try to explain away such obvious cowardice." Keith stood and walked to Jack's desk. The movement was smooth and controlled. Several audience members leaned forward, surprised by the human's confident posture. "What you're seeing," Keith explained as he touched the control panel, "is only part of the story." The screen changed. Keith had somehow accessed additional footage from the same battle. The new view was wider, showing more of the space around, the human ships. "This is the complete recording from the Taurian border incident," Keith said. The audience gasped as they saw what the original footage had hidden. The human ships weren't retreating from the battle. They were moving to protect something. The camera zoomed in to show hundreds of small, shimmering objects behind the human ships. Those are Malosian younglings, Keith explained. Their school. Transport was caught in the crossfire when the Taurians attacked. The Malosians were an aquatic species known for their beautiful coral-like appearance and peaceful nature. Their young traveled in special water-filled pods when away from their home planets. The footage showed clearly that the human ships had positioned themselves between the Taurian attackers and the vulnerable Malosian children. Jack's purple face darkened, the Zarvian equivalent of paling. "Where did you get this footage?" he demanded. "It's the official Confederation record," Keith replied simply. "I'm surprised your research team didn't find it." Greel, standing off stage, looked extremely uncomfortable. He had deliberately chosen the edited version to make humans look bad. "Let's continue watching," Keith suggested. The footage showed what happened next. The human ships, after ensuring the Malosian transport was safely away, turned back to face the much larger Taurian force. Despite being outnumbered 15-1, they engaged the enemy. "Our ships were smaller and less powerful," Keith narrated, as the battle played out on screen. "But sometimes being underestimated is an advantage." The audience watched in stunned silence as the human vessels executed complex maneuvers that confused the larger Taurian ships. The humans' smaller size and greater speed allowed them to target weak points in the Taurian vessels, disabling several without destroying them. "We didn't want to kill the Taurian crews," Keith explained. "Our goal was to stop the attack with minimal loss of life on both sides." When the footage ended, the studio was completely quiet. No one laughed. No one made the hissing sounds of Zarvian disapproval. Even Jack seemed at a loss for words. Keith returned to his seat across from Jack. "Every human in that unit survived," he said quietly. "And so did every Malosian child." Jack struggled to regain control of his show. "Well," he said, trying to sound dismissive. "It wasn't just one act," Keith interrupted. The calm in his voice had a new edge to it. "Humans have been protecting Confederation species since we joined, often without recognition. We don't need credit, we do it because it's right." Jack looked to his producer for help, but Greel was frantically reviewing notes, trying to find another angle of attack. Jack decided to change tactics. "Let's talk about something else," he said, his voice artificially bright. "Humans have such interesting physical limitations. Your slow reflexes, your weak muscles compared to most Confederation species. How does it feel to be so fragile?" Several audience members shifted uncomfortably. After seeing the battle footage, Jack's question seemed inappropriate. Keith smiled slightly. "Are humans really as fragile as you think, Jack?" "Of course," Jack said, regaining some confidence. "It's simple biology. Your muscles provide less force per volume than most species. Your skin tears easily. Your bones break under pressure that other species can withstand easily. You mentioned temperature earlier," Keith said. "How humans can only survive in a narrow temperature range. That was true once." "Once?" Jack repeated, confused. Keith leaned forward. "Jack, did your research team tell you why Earth was invited? To join the Confederation despite our supposed limitations?" Jack faltered. "Well, I assume it was pity? Perhaps a desire for diversity? It was because of what happened during first contact with the Zarvian exploration vessel 50 years ago," Keith said. The audience murmured. This was a part of history many of them didn't know. "The first official meeting between humans and Zarvians didn't go well," Keith continued. "There was a misunderstanding. The Zarvian captain believed humans were too primitive to be worth talking to. He ordered his crew to kill the human delegation as a mercy, to spare us the shame of knowing how inferior we were." Jack looked stunned. This was clearly not in his briefing materials. "What happened?" asked a voice from the audience. "The humans survived," Keith said simply. "All of them, despite weapons designed to kill much hardier species. The Zarvian crew reported that the humans seemed to adapt during the attack. After that, the Confederation decided humans might be more interesting than they first appeared." Jack looked increasingly uncomfortable. "That's just a story," he said dismissively. "Propaganda to make humans seem special. Would you like a demonstration?" Keith asked quietly. Before Jack could answer, Keith placed his hand palm down on the metal table between them. The studio lights reflected off the shiny surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the audience gasped. Frost was forming around Keith's hand. The metal of the table began to crack as the temperature dropped rapidly. Within seconds, the area around Keith's hand was covered in ice crystals. Jack jerked back in his seat, all 6 arms raised defensively. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice higher than normal. Keith lifted his hand. The metal where he had touched it was now brittle enough that a small piece broke off. "Adapting," he said simply. "That's impossible," Jack whispered. "Humans can't control temperature." "Most humans can't," Keith agreed. "But some of us can, just like some of us have enhanced strength, speed, or senses. It was a precaution after our first contact with alien life taught us about galactic prejudice." Keith turned to face the camera directly. "Humans are adaptable. It's our greatest strength. We change to meet challenges, we evolve, we learn." He turned back to Jack. "You asked earlier if the Confederation should trust humans to protect its borders. The answer is yes. Because unlike some species, we don't need to put others down to feel strong. We gain strength by helping those who need it." The silence in the studio was complete. Even the camera operators had stopped moving, transfixed by what was happening. Jack Miller, for perhaps the first time in his career, had nothing to say. The talk show host, who had made his name mocking lesser species, sat frozen in his chair, staring at the broken piece of metal on his desk. From offstage, Greel frantically signaled to cut to commercial. The show's theme music began playing, but no one moved. The audience remained silent, their eyes fixed on the calm human sitting across from their favorite entertainer. As the lights dimmed for the commercial break, Keith Rivers stood and straightened his simple black suit. "Thank you for having me on your show, Jack," he said politely as if nothing unusual had happened. "I hope this has been educational." He walked off the stage with the same quiet confidence he had shown throughout the interview. Behind him, the studio erupted into loud conversations as audience members turned to each other, discussing what they had just witnessed. Backstage, Lila, the Andarian production assistant, was waiting, her large eyes even wider than usual. "That was amazing," she whispered. "No one has ever stood up to Jack like that." Keith smiled. "Someone needed to." "The producer is furious," Lila said, glancing over her shoulder. "He's saying you hacked into their system to show that battle footage." "I didn't hack anything," Keith replied. "I simply accessed the full record that was already in their database." "What happens now?" Lila asked. Keith looked thoughtful. "Now things change." News of what happened on Galactic Spotlight spread faster than a solar flare. By the next morning, the recording had been viewed by billions across the Confederation. The moment when Keith Rivers froze the metal table with his bare hand became the most shared video clip in recent memory. In the human embassy, Sam Jones was staring at his computer screen in disbelief. "He revealed it," Sam said to Betty, who stood beside his desk. "He actually showed them what enhanced humans can do." Betty looked worried. "Is that bad? The secret's out now." "I'm not sure," Sam admitted. "I just got a message from Earth Command. They want Keith to report back immediately." In another part of the embassy, Keith sat alone in a secure communication room. The holographic display showed Commander Diane Wright of Earth Defense Command. Her expression was hard to read. "You were only supposed to hint at our capabilities," she said, "not demonstrate them on the most watched show in the Confederation." "It was necessary," Keith replied calmly. "They wouldn't have believed me otherwise. Zarvians respect strength above all else." Wright sighed. "Well, it's done now. The effect has been interesting. Our intelligence shows that discussions about humans have changed overnight. The question is no longer whether we belong in the Confederation, but what else we might be capable of." "That was the goal," Keith said. "Yes, but now everyone is watching us closely. The Taurians are especially nervous. They've doubled their patrols along the border." Keith leaned forward. "Good. They should be nervous after what they tried to do to those Malosian children." Wright's expression softened slightly. The Malosian government has sent an official thank you to Earth. Apparently, they had no idea humans were responsible for saving their young. The Taurians told them it was a Confederation peacekeeping force. More lies, Keith said, shaking his head. The Taurians have been working against us from the beginning. Speaking of lies, Wright continued, the producer of Galactic Spotlight has been arrested. Greel. For what? Conspiracy against the Confederation. It turns out he's been taking money from anti-human political groups to spread propaganda. Several other media figures are being investigated too. Keith nodded thoughtfully. And Jack Miller? His career is over, Wright said with a small smile. No one wants to watch him anymore. Hard to take him seriously after he was left speechless on his own show. Their conversation was interrupted by a chime. Commander, Keith said, I have to go. The Zarvian High Council has requested a meeting. Wright looked surprised. The High Council? That's unexpected. Be careful, Rivers. This could be a trap. Or it could be an opportunity, Keith replied. An hour later, Keith was escorted into the grand chamber of the Zarvian High Council. The room was circular, with tall windows that let in the pink light of the Zarvian sun. 12 council members sat in elevated seats looking down at the single chair in the center where Keith was directed to sit. The head counselor, an elderly Zarvian with faded purple skin, spoke first. Keith Rivers of Earth, do you know why you have been summoned? I can guess, Keith replied respectfully. Your display on the entertainment program has raised concerns. The counselor continued. For 50 years, humans have been part of the Confederation. At no point did your representatives inform us that some humans possess extraordinary abilities. Keith remained calm. Respectfully, counselor, we were not required to. The Confederation Charter guarantees the right of member species to maintain their own security protocols. We chose not to widely advertise certain capabilities. Another counselor leaned forward. But why hide these abilities? It makes it appear as if humans have something to fear, or something to hide, or something to protect, Keith countered. When Earth first made contact with alien life, the response was violence. We learned to be cautious. The head counselor's expression softened slightly. The incident with the Zarvian exploration vessel. Yes, we have reviewed those records. A regrettable misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that taught us valuable lessons, Keith said, including the fact that some in the Confederation view physical differences as proof of inferiority. The council members exchanged glances. One of them, a female Zarvian with unusually bright purple skin, spoke up. The behavior of Jack Miller and others like him is not representative of Confederation values. And yet, Keith observed, his show was the most popular in 17 star systems. The council had no immediate response to this. Finally, the head counselor spoke again. We have also reviewed the complete records of the Taurian border incident. The human ships were indeed protecting Malosian younglings at great risk to themselves. Why did Earth not publicize this act of bravery? Keith smiled slightly. We don't need recognition to do what's right. This answer seemed to impress several council members. They whispered among themselves for a moment. There is another matter, the head counselor said. Since your appearance on the entertainment program, we have received requests from 23 Confederation worlds for human diplomatic representatives. It seems your people are suddenly in high demand. Keith nodded, keeping his expression neutral despite his inner satisfaction. Earth will be honored to strengthen our ties with other worlds. The Taurians, however, have filed a formal complaint, another counselor added. They claim that enhanced humans present a threat to Confederation security. The only threat, Keith said firmly, is to those who would harm innocent lives, as the Taurians attempted to do with the Malosian children. The head counselor leaned back in his seat. Keith Rivers of Earth, the purpose of this meeting is to determine whether humans with special abilities should be restricted in their movements and activities within Confederation space. Keith remained silent, waiting. Having reviewed all evidence, the counselor continued, including your actions during the Taurian incident and your behavior on the entertainment program, this council finds no basis for such restrictions. Relief washed through Keith, though he kept his expression unchanged. Furthermore, the counselor added, we wish to formally recognize Earth's contribution to Confederation security. Your protection of the Melosian younglings at great risk to your own forces exemplifies the highest values of the Confederation. The counselor stood, and the others followed suit. This meeting is adjourned. Keith Rivers, you are free to continue your duties as cultural ambassador. We look forward to learning more about humanity's adaptability. As Keith left the council chamber, he found Lila waiting outside. The young Andarian looked nervous but excited. Mr. Rivers, I've been waiting for hours. How did it go? Keith smiled. Better than expected. The council has acknowledged Earth's actions and rejected Taurian complaints. Lila's large eyes shone with happiness. That's wonderful. Oh, I almost forgot why I came. I've been offered a job at the human embassy as a cultural liaison. They said they need more staff to handle all the new requests coming in. Congratulations, Keith said. We'd be lucky to have you. There's something else, Lila said, lowering her voice. Everyone's talking about enhanced humans now. Some people are scared, but many more are fascinated. They're calling you the ambassador in the news. Keith raised an eyebrow. Just the ambassador? Well, Lila admitted with a small smile. Some are calling you other things. One news program said you remind them of an old Earth entertainment figure. Someone called Keanu Reeves. Keith finished for her, looking amused. Yes, I've heard that before. As they walked through the grand halls of the Zarvian government building, people stopped to watch Keith pass. Some looked fearful, but many more seemed curious or even admiring. Things are changing, Lila observed. Yes, Keith agreed, and faster than we expected. His communicator chimed. It was a message from Commander Wright. Taurian fleet movement detected near Outpost 7. Enhanced diplomatic team requested. Report back to Earth immediately. Keith's expression turned serious. I need to return to the embassy right away. Is everything okay? Lila asked, noticing the change in his demeanor. Just some diplomatic work that needs attention, Keith replied. He didn't mention that Outpost 7 was a key defensive position near Taurian space, or that enhanced diplomatic team was code for combat-ready enhanced humans. As Keith walked quickly toward the embassy, he thought about how much had changed in just 24 hours. Humans were no longer seen as weak newcomers to be mocked and dismissed. Now they were known to be adaptable, capable of extraordinary abilities, and willing to fight to protect others. The Taurians clearly didn't like this new reality. Their fleet movements suggested they might be planning something desperate. But this time, they wouldn't be facing unprepared human ships. This time, Earth was sending its best. Keith quickened his pace. The real test of humanity's place in the Confederation was just beginning. 3 days later, Keith stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force ship, Defender. Through the large viewing window, he could see the stars and the edge of a blue-green planet. Outpost 7. In the distance, dozens of Taurian warships formed, a threatening line. They've been holding position for 12 hours, said Captain Eric Brown, a tall man with dark skin and serious eyes. No communication, no demands, just sitting there, watching us. Keith nodded. How many ships do we have? 5, Eric replied. Not enough if they decide to attack. We've called for reinforcements, but the nearest Confederation fleet is 2 days away. Keith studied the Taurian ships. They were large and heavily armed, designed to intimidate. The Taurians themselves were a reptilian species with tough, armored skin and aggressive tendencies. They had joined the Confederation reluctantly, only after realizing they couldn't defeat it in war. They're waiting for something, Keith said. Or someone. As if on cue, a signal came through. Incoming transmission from the Taurian flagship, announced the communications officer. Put it on screen, Eric ordered. The large display lit up, showing the face of a Taurian commander. His scaled skin was dark green with red markings that showed his high rank. Yellow eyes with vertical pupils stared at them coldly. "I am Commander Creel of the Torian Defense Force," he said in a deep, rumbling voice. "I demand to speak with the human called Keith Rivers." Keith stepped forward. "I'm Keith Rivers." The Torian's eyes narrowed. "The ambassador. Good. We have matters to discuss." 30 warships seems excessive for a discussion, Keith observed calmly. Creel made a sound that might have been a laugh. "After your performance on Galactic Spotlight, my government felt a show of strength was necessary. Humans have been hiding their true nature from the Confederation. We Taurians do not appreciate deception, nor do we appreciate attempts to kill innocent children," Keith replied, "as your forces tried to do during the border incident." Creel's scales darkened slightly, a sign of anger. A military engagement between armed forces. The Malosian transport should not have been in the area. "And yet it was," Keith said, "and human ships protected it, at risk to themselves." "Yes," Creel hissed. "Human ships with enhanced humans aboard. Just how many of your kind have these special abilities?" Keith smiled slightly. "That information is classified." The Taurian commander slammed a clawed hand down on something off-screen. "The Confederation has a right to know what threat humans pose." "We pose no threat to those who respect Confederation law," Keith said. "Our abilities are for defense, not conquest." "Pretty words," Creel sneered. "But I have seen the reports. Temperature manipulation, enhanced strength, accelerated healing. If all humans can do these things—" "Not all," Keith interrupted, "but enough." The Taurian was silent for a moment, his yellow eyes calculating. "My government demands a full accounting of human capabilities and the number of enhanced humans in Confederation space. Until this information is provided, the Torian Defense Force will maintain its position here." "That sounds like a blockade," Eric said, "which violates Confederation law." "We are merely conducting exercises," Creel replied smoothly. "In international space." Keith stepped closer to the screen. "Commander Creel, I suggest you withdraw your ships immediately. This show of force will not achieve your goals." "You are in no position to make demands," Creel said. 5 ships against 30? Even with your enhanced abilities, you cannot win this confrontation." Before Keith could respond, the communications officer called out, "Sir, multiple ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel." Everyone turned to look at the viewing window. Space seemed to ripple as dozens of ships appeared. They were sleek and elegant, clearly built for speed as well as power. "Malosian vessels," Eric said in surprise. 20 of them." The communications officer spoke again. "Incoming transmission from the Malosian flagship." A new face appeared on the screen beside Creel's. This was a Malosian, a being with blue-green skin that seemed to shimmer like water. They had no hair, but delicate coral-like structures grew from their head in beautiful patterns. "I am Admiral Teeler of the Malosian Navy," the being said, in a musical voice. "Our sensors detect Taurian warships in an aggressive formation near a Confederation outpost. Do you require assistance, human friends?" Keith smiled. "Admiral Teeler, your arrival is well-timed." Creel looked furious. "This is none of Malosia's concern." "When you threaten our friends, it becomes our concern," Teeler replied calmly. "The humans saved our children. We do not forget such actions." Another alert sounded. "More ships arriving," reported the tactical officer. Through the viewing window, they could see another fleet appearing. These ships were small but numerous, at least 50 of them. Andarian vessels, Eric identified them, sounding increasingly amazed. A third face joined the others on the screen, an Andarian with large, kind eyes and blue skin. "High Commander Thala of the Andarian Protection Fleet," the newcomer introduced. "Themselves. We received word that our human allies might need support." Keith recognized the family resemblance to Lila, the production assistant from Galactic Spotlight. It seemed the young Andarian had connections in high places. Creel's scaled face had darkened to an almost black green, a sign of extreme anger. or fear. This is outrageous. A minor border dispute does not require the involvement of half the Confederation. And yet, here we are, Thala said pleasantly. More alerts sounded as additional ships continued to arrive. Zarvian cruisers, Phloxian science vessels, even ships from species that had previously shown little interest in human affairs. Within minutes, the Taurian fleet was surrounded by a much larger combined force. Keith looked at Creel's increasingly uncomfortable expression. It seems, Commander, that humans have more friends than you anticipated. This changes nothing, Creel insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. It changes everything, Keith replied. The Confederation is not based on strength alone, but on mutual support and respect, something the Taurians have never fully embraced. The Taurian commander was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke in a quieter voice. My orders are to maintain position until we receive information about enhanced humans. And my suggestion, Keith said firmly, is that you return to Taurian space and inform your government that this approach will not work. Earth's defensive capabilities are our own business, protected by Confederation law. Any future aggressive actions will be met with a united response. The standoff lasted several tense minutes. Finally, Creel gave a signal to someone off-screen. We will withdraw, for now, but this matter is not settled. One by one, the Taurian ships turned and moved away from Outpost 7. The combined Confederation fleet maintained position until the last Taurian vessel had jumped to faster-than-light speed. On the bridge of the Defender, the crew broke into cheers. Captain Eric Brown shook Keith's hand. That could have gone very differently, he said quietly. Yes, Keith agreed. If we had been alone, it would have meant war. Admiral Teeler and Commander Thala remained on screen. The Taurians will try, again, Teeler warned. They fear what they cannot control. Next time we will be better prepared, Keith assured them. And it seems we won't be facing them alone. After what we saw on the entertainment broadcast, Thala said, many species are reconsidering their view of humans. Your willingness to protect others at your own risk is admirable. The communications continued for some time as the various fleet commanders coordinated their withdrawal. When all was settled, Keith left the bridge and went to his private quarters. He had a report to make. Commander Diane Wright's holographic image appeared. Rivers, I hear there was nearly a war today. Nearly, Keith confirmed. But it turned into something else instead, something better. He explained what had happened, how ships from a dozen different species had arrived to support the human vessels against the Taurian threat. Wright looked thoughtful. So your revelation on that talk show achieved exactly what we hoped for. Humanity has allies now. More than allies, Keith said. Friends. Species that respect us not because they fear our abilities, but because they admire how we use them. The Taurians won't give up so easily, Wright cautioned. No, Keith agreed, but they'll think twice before threatening us again. Wright's expression softened slightly. Well done, Rivers. Report back to Earth when you can. There's talk of promoting you to head of diplomatic relations. After the communication ended, Keith stood by the window of his quarters looking out at the stars. In just 1 week, humanity's place in the Confederation had transformed. No longer dismissed as weak newcomers, humans were now seen as valuable, allies with unexpected strengths. And it had all started with a rude talk show host who thought he could humiliate a quiet human guest. Somewhere on Zarvius Prime, Jack Miller was likely watching the news reports about the confrontation at Outpost 7, learning how the human he had tried to embarrass had just helped prevent an interstellar war. Keith smiled at the thought. Sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. Humans had been underestimated since they joined the Confederation. That time was now over. As the Defender prepared to return to Earth, Keith thought about the future. There would be challenges ahead. The Taurians would try again. Other species might fear humanity's potential. But for the first time, humans were not F.